Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and it's finally time. SFO Grimhammer 3 has now finally dropped its first patch, known as the Art of War. Well, the patch isn't out yet. It releases on the 29th of this month, so this coming Friday, just as Venris promised. But until then, I'm collaborating with Venris once again to have a good look through the patch itself. There are 16 pages of patch notes, by the way, and I'm going to have multiple videos showcasing everything that's relevant. So today I'm going to focus on general changes, so stuff that's just fixing everything as a whole, changes to the siege rework, making sieges a lot more bearable, let's be honest about that, and a few other things, whilst tomorrow onwards is going to focus on different factions. So there'll be a video on Slaanesh, Tzeentch, and all the others too. So let's not waste any more time and jump right in, because there is a decent amount to talk about just for today alone. So we're going to jump right in with a rather important change here, which is adjustments were done to battle values like hit chance, collision damage, and so on. So what you can see here is I've got some Bloodthirsters charging right in. This affects lords, heroes, units all around. And they're charging into Plague Bearers who are not really flying around that much. Not anymore, at least, and that's because that's been changed. This is mainly because the Plague Bearers are a lot more resilient. Now, the Bloodthirsters themselves are actually a lot better too. The thing is that you're not seeing too much difference because, well, Nurgle's supposed to be very tanky. But what you're going to see here is that they're going to be much better at single entities. So, for example, the Great Unclean ones, which are on screen, they're going to be able to do a bit more damage going straight in, and that's a lot better. Especially when the Bloodthirsters haven't really been in a good place at the moment, so this does make them be a bit more viable. But perhaps the biggest change is with Slaanesh, especially with the chariots. Impact damage is a lot stronger now. You can see that here when it comes to, well, Seeker chariots pretty much deleting units of peasants. So now Slaaneshi chariots will make quick use out of, well, anything that's kind of trashy and a little bit mid-tier. You have to obviously take into account that depending on how you attack and what you're attacking, if they're bracing, you're going to do less damage. If you come from the flank or the rear, you're going to be much more effective. But the Seekers here, they were really good coming in for the front line. I think generally the damage is good all around. You can see it there. The general damage output is much, much better. A small and minor change which has also been brought in from SFO 1 and SFO 2 is that you've got a bit of a change there with the unit cards to your characters. This is just to make them stand out a bit more, so now they've got the orangey gold. Now what you will notice here is that this is the very first battle that you fight with Skarbrand, and my game is running pretty well. Frames are quite high at the moment, and that's simply because SFO also removes a lot of excess type of glow. Anything like way too many particle effects and so on, especially that on characters. That's pretty much gone too. So your characters aren't going to sparkle, which they shouldn't anyway, but you know. My average here was pretty much just standing on 60 frames per second, so that was actually quite nice to see, as the game has been having a few frame rate issues which could be tied to a number of things. A very nice quality of life change here is tied to spells, especially that which provides regeneration, anything that heals. You can see now at the bottom, you can tell that it will replenish to a certain amount. So for example, with this Nurglish spell, you can see that it says that it will restore up to 30% of hit points, which is great. This tells you exactly how much you're going to get healed. This is very useful because now it will be much easier for you to plan when to cast your healing spells. It will allow you to plan for your Winds of Magic much better, in my opinion. At least this is from my testing. It's just been a lot easier just to plan ahead. This tooltip has been implemented for any relevant spells and laws of magic, including those from factions that we can't play just yet, maybe just to plan ahead for the future, which is always great. For most range units, the fire arc has been increased from 60 to 80. Now the reason this was done is to allow you to be able to get better shots out and not have to worry too much about your units moving too much. It allows for a more stationary yet still effective point of damage, which is what you want with range. You want them stationary, you want them firing, you don't want them moving around too much and then losing efficiency essentially, which this does solve. It's not a big change, but once you guys get your hands on this, you'll realize that you'll notice a bit more fluidity when it comes to range fire. One of my favorite changes is the following. Morale changed to be based mostly on health and not actions, removing endgame unbreakable unit problems. So what I'm showing on the screen right now is a bunch of Chaos Warriors of Khorne with additional hand weapons fighting against some peasant spearmen. Now the peasant spearmen are going to last a lot longer because battles are going to be a lot longer too. But keep in mind that this is not affecting everything else. This doesn't mean that fear doesn't work, terror doesn't work, leadership debuffs don't work. This means that health is more related to everything. So yeah, they'll stay longer, and you'll do a lot more fighting, which will make the battle last longer, and it'll give you a proper total war feel. It's not like armies are going to keep routing very, very quickly. Now, this did take about a minute or so, but keep in mind that yes, the values when comparing both units are very different, but the Peasant Spearmen lasted a decent amount longer too, despite the fact that some of my Chaos Warriors were getting into the flank. So yeah, it's gonna feel like you're fighting a proper war. A minor change, but a welcome change, is the resizing of Lords, Heroes, and Legendary Lords. You can see this here, where Catherine and this Ice Witch now are more or less the same size as the Corsairs. This is more for people who care about aesthetics, where Boyars would be 2 heads taller than even the Zargard. So now everything's a bit more realistic. Now, there are characters like Volkmar the Grim, Karl Franz, and so on, which will be up in scale, or they'll be a bit bigger in general, but that's because lore-wise, that's what it demands. This next change is quite exciting, especially if you like using cultists. Summons have been reworked. There are now 3 types of unbinding. First is based on time, after which the unit dies, 3 minutes for most cases, where before your summons would pretty much start leaving a lot sooner. The second puts units on a shorter kill clock, and it only ticks when Winds of Magic are below 15, with a total of 60 seconds, and the third is minus 25% Malice to main stats when health is below 50%. That would be for Skaven. The original one, the first one, is for stuff like, say for example, Demonettes. It's more to give you a different change and make summoning much more viable. You can now summon, like you can see here, I've got a bunch of cultists summoning, and the Demonettes are just meeting up with the Peasant Spearmen. They're there for 3 minutes. They can do a lot of damage in 3 minutes. Even if the battles are longer, now I have a reason to bring cultists more into my battles. Because now it's not just a free summon, but rather it's a proper free unit. You can now take advantage of this and keep summoning stuff, obviously with your limitations of how many casters you have to bring them in, but now summons are a lot more worth it. For a general tactics point of view, especially when it comes to, say for example, Demonettes, you don't have to summon them directly on the enemy or near enough so they can charge. You can summon them with a distance and move them around if you need to, just in case you need to think up of a new strategy, because maybe your front line is now being destroyed and you need to flank on a different side, or just general stuff like that. Making even, say for example, Chaos Furies even more worth it now, because now they'll last for a bit longer. Now I can summon them quite far off and have them go to basically the other side of the map to hunt down a war machine, just in case I've just noticed that a war machine is undefended. This is a bit of a game-breaking bug which has now been fixed that many might have not noticed, but towers, when it came to those attached to your walls, were all in its strongest form. Now they have actually been changed, so a level 1 settlement with walls will have a level 1 tower, a level 2 will have level 2 towers, and so on, which means that you won't have very powerful towers to deal with at the start of your campaign. So early sieges will be a lot more bearable, let's just put it at that, and there's a lot more to come for sieges. Walls and gates have had a pretty massive increase to HP. You can see that the gate has 30,000 and the walls have 40,000. This is to make it a bit more like the actual defenses than anything else, as we are aware that, well, it was too easy to knock down walls, it was too easy to knock down gates. You could pretty much just have basic footmen or characters just knock down the gate, which made it, well, it made the battering rams and siege towers a bit redundant. However, now bringing them is quite advised, especially if you want to take out the gates, if you want to bring in your hordes in and don't want to use ladders and you don't want to use siege towers. Because the defenders are getting some nice changes there, you've also had a nice buff, especially to durability for siege towers and battering rams. That means that you can now viably use them without them getting destroyed. Mind you, they can still be targeted, and if there is a lot of focus fire, they will be brought down, but they can last a lot more now. Through my testing, I found them a lot more useful, especially since my units are taking a long time to knock down the castle gates. I need to have them a bit more defended. The siege towers work very, very well for this. The battering rams are much better too now, as because the gates have been so increased in health, they can take down the gate in 3 hits. They'll do 10,000 damage. Nothing else will do that much damage to gates. So battering rams are now quite essential if you want to knock down some gates. Keep in mind the traditional way is still possible, but a lot slower, so you have to think ahead. You have to also keep them alive, so this will also change up how you battle when you attack enemy settlements. You might not notice it much here as I'm using half a stack, but battlements, and that means both towers and barricades that are built by either yourself or the AI, will now need a lot more damage to successfully take it out very quickly. So with a half stack that was about one shot. However, with just one unit firing, you can see it does take a while to hit the barricades. It will take a lot longer. This means that the range meta for attacking and defending is going to change a little bit. This is to keep things a bit more balanced and have barriers and towers acting like barriers and towers. So yeah, a few things have changed here, but don't worry too much just yet. To make that more bearable for the attacker, as you can see, there's a tower there and it's taking a while to build up. It actually takes around 2 minutes. It depends on the tower too, so no more instant build anymore. This is something that is a massive issue in Total War Warhammer 3, and now you won't have to deal with that again. So now you can focus around going around and doing damage. You won't have to worry too much. It does put a bit more pressure when it comes to the defender of where and when to build, which does add to more of needing to strategize, but then again, that's kind of good for a game that requires strategy, doesn't it? All the barriers now have the same cost, regardless of what effects they may have. This is because they're mostly there to act as barriers anyway, so they're not really that important, and you can pretty much live without them depending on what you're using them for. But they're just that, they're barriers. They act as a stopper for the most cases, whilst you get more damage output from your units and, say for example, your towers. Your towers, on the other hand, have been changed quite a lot. As you know, there are 4 different levels of towers, and now each of them have their range. So if you go for the cheapest tower, they're going to have very small range, still quite a lot, but as you progress and you spend more to be able to get better towers, not only will you get better ammunition, but you'll get a lot more range too. This is quite good because now you can plan about where to position certain towers to be able to get the maximum damage output. You can have the weaker towers up the front, because if you know that you're going to lose that area eventually, there's no point spending a lot of supplies in that location, whereas your stronger towers can be further back and can hit from quite far away. This is going to be very beneficial for siege defenders, and it definitely gives you more incentive to fight at the front rather than just waiting at the very end and waiting for them to come to you. For those of you who want the set numbers, as you know, towers in vanilla would take 90 seconds to build, which really isn't a lot of time. Now, how it works is Tower 1 takes 125 seconds, Level 2 takes 150 seconds, Level 3 takes 175 seconds, and finally Level 4 takes 200 seconds. That is a lot more. It will make you have to think about the towers, and it will bring a little bit of a deterrence to the AI when they're building them up too. The AI is still going to be stupid because that's just Total War AI, and it will probably try to build up towers, but it will lose a lot of valuable resources like this. It's just important that you're not dealing with tower spam anymore, and I've been testing this for a few hours now. It's quite late at night at the moment, and yeah, it's worked out quite well for me. I've actually been enjoying sieges a lot more as the attacker and as the defender. There has been some mod integration coming in too through collaboration, which brings in Dilaguana's GMD spawn reskins, making each of the Chaos Spawn a little bit different, and as you can see, they all have various different uses in-game. We'll start going into detail once we start going into all the individual factions for this, because there's a lot to talk about for all the individual monogod factions, but everything looks so cool, especially the Nurgle ones. I must say that they're my favorite, which is weird because you'd think I'd go for the Sneshi ones. Each of the Chaos Spawn also act radically different when it comes to the game now. This is something that will be explored later on in the individual videos, because like I said, there's a lot of changes, but it's so cool to see Chaos Spawn kind of fitting the theme of each of the Chaos Gods. It's going to make the units feel a tad more special, and that's certainly what I felt when I've been testing them out. They feel unique, even though they're the same unit. It's just so much nicer this way. Another integration is that of the Better Camera mod by Cam, which is very widely popular, and as you can see here, the Tzeentchian Chaos Knights do have a fresh new helmet. Well, more of a fresh new look. This was created by Xenon of the SFO team, and the Tzeentchian Knights just look more Tzeentchian. They look really, really good. I know a lot of people don't zoom into the models a lot because, you know, you play from an aerial view, but aesthetic is important, and they just look fantastic like this. Now, there's going to be more emphasis on this soon, so it's not going to be too long until you start seeing all the changes to Tzeentch and all the other gods and factions and all that. but this is just the general changes, and hopefully you guys are excited from what you're hearing so far. SFO Grimhammer 3, the Art of War patch, drops on the 29th of April. It's not too long now, so let me know what you guys think in the comments below. A big thank you to Venris once again for the collaboration effort, and I shall see you all again very, very soon. Have a nice day.